Happy Friday the 13th, everybody. I wanted to be festive and give you guys a video today, but technically this is not new content. This is a excerpt from my Evil Dead retrospective video that I made about a year and a half ago, but it is Friday the 13th themed because I'm going to be talking about the Freddy vs. Jason vs. Ash comic book series. I thought I would put this segment out on its own because some people might not even know that I reviewed this comic, and I did not feature this in the Friday the 13th or the Nightmare on Elm Street video. It's only featured in the Evil Dead video. So if you're looking for reviews of this comic just based upon Friday the 13th or Jason Voorhees or Freddy Krueger, you might not be able to find it. So I figured it would work well as its own video, but I do apologize because technically it's not new content. Like I said, this is about a year and a half ago that I recorded this. But regardless, this is going to be a review of both the Freddy vs. Jason vs. Ash comic books. The first one came out in 2007, and the second one I think came out in 2009. They are written by James Keurig and Jeff Katz and illustrated by Jason Craig, and technically the first Freddy vs. Jason vs. Ash comic book is based upon the original treatment for what would have been the movie. So in case you guys don't know, there actually were some real talks about doing this as a film after the first Freddy vs. Jason. Unfortunately, that movie never had an actual sequel, but they were thinking about incorporating Ash from the Evil Dead series into the next movie, and the original comic book series kind of follows the template of what that movie would have been like. Ultimately, it didn't happen because Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell didn't want to give up creative control of the character, of which I understand, and it can be very hectic to put these horror characters all together into one series because everybody has to agree on what the characters can and can't do, and it's very, very hard to make everybody happy in order to bring these things to fruition. So even though the concepts sound really cool in our heads, when it comes to the creative process and the ownership over these characters, almost nobody can agree on what they want to have them do. And honestly, it's a miracle that we got Freddy vs. Jason to begin with. And even that movie took over 10 years since it was teased and probably 20 years since it was originally conceptualized. But regardless, for your Friday the 13th, sit back and enjoy my review of these comics. They're very hard to find. I had to read them online because physical copies are almost non-existent. But if you do get a chance, check them out. And if not, well, here's what I think about them. The comic starts out and you have Laurie and Will from Freddy vs. Jason, and for some godforsaken reason, they decide to return to Camp Crystal Lake. And I thought one of the funniest things was that the reason that Ash is brought here, not just coming here to find the Necronomicon and destroy it once and for good, but the other reason is that they built an S-Mart right like down the street from the camp, which is absolutely hilarious. And Ash is being a transferred employee coming to that S-Mart. And it just makes me laugh so hard because it's like, as much as Ash can't escape the evil of the world, he also can't seem to escape retail. And maybe that's the reason why I vibe so hard with Ash in Evil Dead. Maybe I just understand him on that visceral level because I worked retail for most of my life, only quitting for the first time last year, and it still haunts me to this day. I have dreams, I have nightmares, I have visions. I think about old customers yelling at me about coupons and spitting in my face. It's a long story. If you work retail, I'm with you, man. Like, my heart goes out to you. Like, we are one. We are one and the same, man. So Will and Laurie show up at the lake only because Laurie wants to make sure that Freddy and Jason are dead. So Will had no reason to be here. He didn't want to come. He only came because his girl asked him to. My poor man Will lost his entire youth living in an insane asylum because of some convenient lie that came up about him witnessing the death of Laurie's mom. And so he lost his entire youth, and then he finally gets out, and he finally gets with his ex-GF, and she's like, let's go back to the cabin and see if Jason's actually dead. Woman, you're crazy. Now, I know it's a trope in a lot of horror movies to bring back characters in the sequel and then kill them off, and maybe that's what they were going with here. But Laurie and Will don't really add anything to this story of what the comic is doing. It's just the opening kill scene to show that Jason is still alive, and he does kill them both. After that, Ash shows up. He comes to the S-Mart, and there's a bunch of S-Mart employees. There's kind of like a whole group of kids that he kind of leads in this story, and that was my least favorite element of it. I didn't care about any of them. They gave him a love interest. I think Caroline was her name, which is one of the employees, and it just, none of it I didn't like any of that. I understood having those characters as a body count because you got to have a body count. If you have, an Evil Dead mixed with Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street, you got to kill people. So I understand that aspect of it, but I really didn't like any of these characters. And I was just focused on Ash the entire time. The other thing I thought was cool is that the severed head of Freddy from the end of Freddy vs. Jason, Jason brought back to his little shrine and put it right next to his mother's severed head that you see in Friday the 13th Part 3. I like that idea. Also, I guess Freddy is communicating with Jason mentally and within his dreams, I suppose, still kind of alive but needing to be resurrected. And that's why he needs the Necronomicon, because it will allow him to ascend back to full power. I can buy that. The Necronomicon is pretty much a MacGuffin that can do anything demonic. So reviving Freddy, finding a way to revive him, bring him into the real physical world, have him keep his powers once he's there. I can imagine the Necronomicon has some way to do that. So Freddy knows the Necronomicon is nearby, so he wants Jason to get it, so he's manipulating Jason to do it by basically being his stepdaddy. There's a dream sequence where he's banging Jason's mom. I don't know. And essentially, getting the Necronomicon changes hands a few times. Ash goes to try to get it, and then there's a bunch of kills by Jason. There is a great moment where Jason actually goes into the S-Mart. So you see Jason in the middle of a well-lit retail store, and he does kill somebody with a shopping cart, which is fantastic. I would love to see that in a movie. And there's this really annoying manager there that carries around a clipboard at all times, and he kills him with the clipboard. That's creative. I like that. That is something that if they were to actually make this in a movie, I would like to see that because it's something different. You'd never see Jason in a convenience store. We've seen him in New York City, but we've never seen him in a convenience store, and killing somebody with a shopping cart is just the kind of thing that I would expect Jason to do. So I really, really enjoyed that. It changes hands a few times, but eventually Jason gets the Necronomicon, which allows Freddy Krueger to kind of come back, resurrect, be more than just a head, his full body. But he also has this enhanced ability that he can use some of his dreamscape powers in the real world, which makes him like 10 times more, devastating than he was before. Ash does have a nightmare where he meets Freddy for the first time, which is great. Freddy has his glove hand kind of grow from Ash's severed hand. He thinks he gets his hand back, and then the glove grows over it. He has to chop it off again, so that's pretty cool. A lot of cool ideas in here, really. Like, honestly, if they made this into a live action, obviously there's a lot you'd have to expand on, but there's a lot of cool ideas that are floating here, and if these are the same ideas that were kind of pitched for the actual live action version, I would have really liked to see these. Ash fights him for a little bit, and then Freddy kind of reveals himself to have powers in the real world also. And another cool aspect is he resurrects a bunch of the victims of Jason. Once Jason turns on him again, which is inevitably going to happen, he resurrects a bunch of his victims. And although it's only in a few panels, I imagine if it was in a movie, it would be expanded on. I'm imagining like Deadite versions of past victims from the Friday the 13th films. How cool would it be to kind of go back and bring back, I don't know, like that jokester that gave him the hockey mask to begin with in Part 3, or like, I don't know, any of the other victims that we've seen throughout the Friday the 13th franchise come back, but as Deadites. And they basically try to like grab Jason and throw him into hell and stuff like that. A great awesome thing that they do also is kind of change the forms of Freddy and Jason a little bit. Well, mostly Freddy. There is a brief scene in Freddy vs. Jason in the movie where he gets really pissed off and his makeup changes, and he kind of looks a lot more demonic, like a lot more like a demon. He has that form in this comic, but it's kind of expanded on, like the flesh around his cheeks is kind of melting away, and you can see his jaw, and he's got like basically like his ears are like devil horns. And I really like it, man. The thing is, like, as much as I prefer like the traditional, Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street movies, I like when they take risks and go a little bit batshit crazy with it, because we've seen the status quo many times. That's why I kind of appreciate Jason Goes to Hell, because even though I don't think it's a great movie, I really appreciate the balls of just kind of going batshit with it, and that's kind of the vibe I was getting from this a little bit. But it does culminate in a fight between Jason, Freddy, and Ash all fighting together. Ash does get fucked up quite a bit, but, he perseveres. He's Ash. And then it ends, of course, with the Necronomicon passages being read and kind of pulling them into a hell dimension of some sort, and that's it kind of ends on a whimper. It kind of goes out really quick. It's only 6 issues, so it's got a lot of build up, getting Freddy back, being revived, Ash being there, assembling his team. There's a lot of kind of build up, and there's a short payoff, and then it ends. And that would be my only real criticism with it, is that I want to see more of kind of the carnage once everything is going crazy at the end. But I actually did really enjoy it. I thought it was pretty good. I thought it was pretty solid. I would say if you're a fan of any 3 of these franchises, if you saw this in the Barnes and Nobles or something, I don't know what would sell comics like this. Probably nowhere anymore. I don't know. I would pick it up. But there was a second Freddy vs. Jason vs. Ash, a sequel. So let me get right back to you guys after I read that one. Okay, you know how I said I liked when things get batshit crazy? In this instance, in the sequel comic of Freddy vs. Jason vs. Ash, The Nightmare Warriors, I regret saying that. This one is so all over the place. In some aspects, I appreciate that they tried to combine so much of the lore of the Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street series into this. Not so much of the Evil Dead, actually. A little bit, but not as much as I would hope so. But this just went crazy. Okay, so in the sequel comic, essentially, I was wrong. At the end of the first one, Jason doesn't get pulled into the Necronomicon vortex. Just Freddy does. He sinks in the lake again. The government shows up, and you know how I distrust the government immediately, so that's not going to be good. They're aware of the Necronomicon for some reason, and they want to use it to help basically fight terroristic threats. Like, they want to figure out how to harness the power of Freddy's dream ability and the Necronomicon to basically take people out from a distance and use it to their benefit. So they start to translate the Necronomicon. I don't know. Jason rises from the grave once again, and once again gets manipulated by Freddy, this time to go take out Ash because of last time. And the girl that Ash was with actually was still with him. Actually, they're just hanging out, cooking a barbecue. I do like the image of Ash having a spatula on his severed hand instead of a chainsaw. But of course, Jason shows up and kills Catherine, so it is Ash on his own, wanting vengeance once again. But here's where things get really crazy, is they bring back characters from both the Friday the 13th and the Nightmare on Elm Street lore, but it is really, really hard to keep track of them because I had a hard time like figuring out who was who, because they're all just drawn, they're all just illustrated. They don't look how they did in the movies. And also we have children that were in the movies that were grown up. There was a baby in Jason Goes to Hell, which is now basically an adult or close to. Same thing with the child from the Dream Child from Nightmare on Elm Street Part 5. We have Jason's daughter from Freddy's Dead, who basically gets manipulated by Jason here, it's so crazy, manipulated by Freddy. And there's a really weird scene where he's like, come to daddy, and it's drawn, well, I don't know. I mean, I guess I wouldn't put it past Freddy to do this to his daughter, but still. And there's this whole like team assembled of previous characters. There's the psychic girl from Friday the 13th Part 7, and there's like Freddy's daughter, and just a bunch of characters. And then Tommy Jarvis even shows up. Fucking Tommy Jarvis, originally played by Corey Feldman, also was in Part 5 and Part 6. Tommy Jarvis is here, and of course, he's the Jason expert. But he's kind of like off on his own. Like, he comes into the group for a moment. Him and Ash kind of butt heads, which is unfortunate because, not unfortunate that they butt heads, but those are the two characters that I would really like to see together. A lot of the other characters, I'm just like, why are you back? Why are you here? I mean, I guess I understand and I appreciate them trying to pull so much from all these franchises together, but it was just a little bit overwhelming. Not to mention the fact that the actual plot line with the government is here, and they pull Freddy back out of the Necronomicon, but they pull him back as human. But really, Freddy still actually does have his abilities and is just kind of fooling them. And he manipulates Jason once again for the third time in a row. And you would think Jason would realize, but then Jason is Jason, so whatever. And then he kind of gives Jason a makeover. Like, he pretties him up. He gives him long hair. He makes him handsome. But then he sends Jason out to be a member of his Deadeye army, because apparently while Freddy was within the Necronomicon dimension of whatever evil was there. He's like assimilated with it, and like his body, you know how he like pulled up his shirt and showed all the souls within him in one of the Nightmare movies? Well, now it's like the Necronomicon is his body, which is kind of the only concept in this comic series that I liked. I kind of liked the idea of Freddy, you know, once he's within the world of the Necronomicon, that he would somehow find a way to master it and assimilate over it. It feels very in character for Freddy to do that. Also, just Freddy just has... He's got, like, Ash has got a lot of plot armor, but Freddy's got a ton of plot armor, man. But then he creates a Deadeye army. He resurrects a Deadeye army for Jason to lead. And Jason leads the Deadeye army into Congress and just kills all the politicians. On second thought, you know what? Maybe this comic is awesome. Apparently George Bush must have still been president when this came out because they show him, but it's actually Freddy masquerading as him. So Freddy is creating this worldwide like Deadeye army for just absolute destruction. Ash has a ragtag team of various characters from other Nightmare and Friday the 13th movies. There's the character that's related to Jason, like his niece from Jason Goes to Hell. She's a prominent character here. And then the ending gets so crazy. There's so much chaos happening. They're all fighting outside of the White House. There's a Deadeye army. There's Jason. Eventually, they have Tommy Jarvis eventually beat Jason and sever his head. But, of course, at the very end, it's kind of like alluded to that Jason will resurrect once again. But they give Tommy Jarvis his moment. But for Freddy, he goes to attack. There's so many characters. There's what's her name? Alice, that had the Dream Child from part 5, but the Dream Child's older now. But then he unleashes all of the souls of Freddy's past victims. So we see like fucking Kincaid and, you know, the other characters from Dream Warriors. And then, of course, fucking Nancy. You know, because we got to add in all the characters. Also, we have Freddy's mom, the nun. Because we got to add in as many fucking characters as humanly possible within this 6-issue series. So, of course, we got to bring all these characters back. And they pull, you know, Freddy's powers out of him and then make him actually human. And then Ash kills the human Freddy. Yeah, I don't know, man. This one is just wild. This is like, first of all, you need to have a PhD in the entire franchise lore of Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street to keep track of who these characters are. Not to mention the fact that we're not fighting in the dream world. We're not fighting at Crystal Lake. We're going to the White House and Congress. There's that aspect. And then also, I don't feel like Ash did enough. This is an Evil Dead video at the end of the day, and I feel like Ash, I mean, he's prominent. You know, he's in every single issue. He's doing things, but he's part of a group rather than kind of being just Ash. And I would prefer, like, this came out before Ash vs. Evil Dead was a TV show, but if we were, you know, I'd like to see, like, Kelly and Pablo in the group also. I understand this came out before then, but not a lot of Evil Dead lore, though. There is the Necronomicon, but they basically just use that as a vessel to do whatever they want and for Freddy Krueger to have complete control over everything. But, yeah, I don't know, man. I guess, again, like, I appreciate them trying to bring so much in together, but it's almost too much. It's overwhelming. I thought the first Freddy vs. Jason vs. Ash was much better because of its simplicity. Seeing a pretty boy, long hair Fabio Jason leading a Deadeye army into Congress is kind of feels like a dream. Like, it kind of feels like that should be the dream sequence. I don't know. Read this one at your own discretion, I would say. Also, I wasn't a huge fan of the artwork. No offense to the artist himself, but there's some parts where it was kind of like, I don't know. But yeah, so there we go. So I read an Evil Dead comic. I chose to read the Freddy vs. Jason vs. Ash series. I'm not surprised they didn't make another one after this one. Maybe we should go back and reboot it. I don't know. Which would be awesome. Let's see current day Ash. Let's see post Ash versus Evil Dead, you know, versus Jason and Freddy. And throw Michael Myers in there too. Why not? I miss him. Thank you guys a lot for watching this video review. I really do appreciate it. This, like I said, is an excerpt from my full Evil Dead retrospective, which I will link down below. And if you're fans of the other characters, I've also done one for Jason Voorhees and Freddy Krueger as well. Enjoy your Friday, everybody, and I'll talk to you next time.